Now, Connor McDavid is running away with the NHL's scoring race. He's well ahead of Leon Draisaitl, his teammate, and the likes of Austin Matthews as well. Earlier in the year, Austin Matthews was being talked about more and more when it comes to who should be this year's Hart Trophy candidate or the Ted Lindsay. And one of these days, the NHL will figure out why we have to have two different awards for that, for the most valuable player or whatever. But Connor McDavid, it's pretty clear he's going to win the scoring race. What do you think about Connor McDavid as the Hart Trophy candidate? Do you think at this moment in time he is the clear winner, or do you think there's still debate around that?
Well, there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any debate who the best player in the National Hockey League is. And I think he's head and shoulders above anyone else in the league. And there's a lot of great players out there, like Austin Matthews is having a great season, and Nate McKinnon's having a great season, and he's a great player as well. But I do think you look at Connor McDavid now, and he's still approaching his prime, which is kind of the scary part about this. He's still going to get better, and he's still going to be more dominant. And he's just so much better than everyone else in the league right now. And I don't see how you can not give him the Hart Trophy and basically every award that comes with the best player in the league. You look at his numbers now, and he says he doesn't really care about the 100 points in 56 games, but you can bet that he's shooting for 100 points in 56 games. That's going to be a target for him. And they play Vancouver 4 times at the end of the year, and look out Vancouver, because he's going to be looking to pile on the points in those last few games. So he talks like he doesn't care about that, but he does. And to get 100 points in 56 games, that's just unbelievable. It'd be an unbelievable accomplishment for him. He makes everyone around him better. Everyone that plays on his line is better. And he's one of those guys, once in a generational player that decides, I'm going to go score, and sometimes there's not much you can do about it. So I know other markets and other folks would like to try and make this a contest, make it a competition, and sometimes the voters do get a little, I think, picky when it comes to that. You look at the NBA, LeBron James is the best player in the NBA for years and years and years, and they would find reasons not to give LeBron James the MVP. And I'd hate to see that with Connor McDavid now, and I'd hate to see that him not getting this MVP award in the NHL just because people are trying to find reasons not to give it to him. It's kind of like the Lou Marshall Award, the Canadian Athlete of the Year, how Connor McDavid is not in that conversation every year, how he's not a finalist every year. It's just they try and find reasons not to give it to him. He's obviously the best player in the National Hockey League, which makes him one of the best athletes in the country. And so it's tough not to recognize him in that regard. But I think a lot of people look at it kind of like when Gretzky was playing. They were looking for reasons to give it someone other than Gretzky, just because he was so far ahead of everyone else. But I think if you think that there's a better player in the National Hockey League and someone that's more valuable to his team than Connor McDavid, then you're not paying attention. You're just not, and you shouldn't have a vote, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you bring up Wayne Gretzky. I mean, McDavid's on pace to get to a level of scoring that we haven't seen since Wayne Gretzky was an Oiler. Connor could get upwards of 140, 150 points if he keeps up his current pace. Gretzky had 149 points his last season as an Oiler. That's 33 years ago. Nikita Kucherov with the Lightning a couple of years ago won the Hart on the strength of his scoring as well. He had almost 130 points in scoring a couple of seasons ago. So, I think about, the Hart Trophy in particular. That's voted on by Professional Hockey Writers Association across the National Hockey League. And, we have X number of voters in each market. Austin Matthews plays in Toronto, and Toronto being the biggest hockey market in the entire league, if not in the planet. They get to watch Austin Matthews every single day. I mean, the one thing about Connor McDavid is that the Oilers this season are playing in the Maple Leafs division. And you think about the teams down east and the markets down east as well, New York, Boston, Chicago. It's almost as though, we're in Edmonton, so of course we see Connor McDavid every day. We think about him and talk about him and write about him every day. But it's almost as though you want to have like some sort of a mediator from Kansas City or someplace very neutral to take a very good look at the situation.
Well, I think there's a plus and a minus here. Yeah, you have the Toronto-based writers that now see Connor McDavid 9 times a year, and they saw what he was capable of doing. And you're seeing a highlight from him every other night. Just an incredible play, an incredible highlight from him every other night. I think what's going to hurt Connor McDavid is the American writers in New York and in Boston and some of those other big markets who are basically just focused on their division. And it's kind of been a strange season because of the divisional play. If you kind of just focused on your division, and that comes with the players and teams and writers and everything, because for me personally, if the Oilers aren't playing, then I'm watching another game in the Canadian division because it affects the Oilers. And I think it's the same way with teams in the East Division and the other American divisions. They're just focused on their division. So they don't see a lot outside of that division. And I'm first to admit, when I'm watching hockey and it's not the Oilers, I'm watching the Leafs, I'm watching the Canucks, I'm watching the Montreal Canadiens, I'm watching games in the Canadian division. So I don't know too much what's going on outside the division, unless you have to have to search for it. Now, obviously, the Taylor Hall story was there, so you kind of look for the Taylor Hall. Now Taylor Hall's in Boston, and you want to see how he's doing in Boston. But I think that's going to be a problem because I'm pretty sure a lot of American writers who aren't watching the Canadian division, they think, okay, the Canadian division there has nothing to do with us. That's going to have some sort of effect on the voting is where the American block of writers vote. Now, if they would look just by the numbers alone, there's no contest. McDavid's running away with the scoring race, and he's the tightest checking guy in National Hockey League. Guys, teams are grabbing him, hooking him, holding him, obstructing him. It's unbelievable because McDavid should be drawing a penalty every other shift just with the hooking and holding and all the stuff that they do to try and slow him down. So I think that when it becomes an issue, I think the Toronto media is starting to come around and they're saying, okay, we got a pretty good player in Austin Matthews, and when he does something well, they try to blow it up as much as possible. Like the goal he scored the other night was a great goal, great hand-eye coordination, knock the puck down and shoot it. But it doesn't compare to Connor McDavid skating down the ice and beating 5 guys and then walking it into the net, basically. So I think they recognize that Matthews is an exceptional hockey player, but he's not the best hockey player in the NHL as long as Connor McDavid is still playing in the league.
You mentioned not watching other divisions. Because we do have some great stories around the National Hockey League. Obviously teams like Vegas and Colorado are at the top of the West Division, led by Nate McKinnon in Colorado, and Mark Stone is having a MVP-worthy season in Vegas. But at the same time, like you're right, we don't get to watch that every night. And the Oilers don't play Vegas and Colorado this year. Never mind what's going on down east with Florida and Carolina in particular.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's just natural. I think you talk to players, and they're only watching games in their own division too. Like in passing, basically the only time you watch the other divisions is when no one in your division is playing, and that's obviously a rarity to have no one in your division playing. Or if your division was the early game, and then there's a late game, and you can watch kind of a late game from the West Coast or something like that. So it's kind of an interesting season in that regard, and I think going into the year, no one was sure how it was going to work out, but I do believe that you're just watching the division that's going to affect your team, and I think everyone's doing that right now.
Coming back to the Oilers, Connor McDavid has had Dominic Cahoon on his left side for the first time regularly this season lately. How has Dominic Cahoon looked? I mean, he's finally gotten a shot there, and the talk about Dominic Cahoon is, if he's not playing in the top 6, shouldn't be in the lineup. He's that kind of a player. He's not going to be your checking third line winger, never mind on the fourth line. How does he work with Connor McDavid? How has it looked?
Well, it's looked okay. Dominic Cahoon is a good offensive player, but he's not offensively gifted, and I think that's one of the things that's a little different. He has some good chemistry with Connor McDavid. Basically, he gives him the puck and he tries to go find open ice, and I think that's kind of the key when you're playing with Connor McDavid. Give him the puck, find open ice. When he's on a rush, get out of his way. And so I think Cahoon recognizes that. But I think in order to stay on that line is if you get opportunities in front of the net, if you get set up by Connor McDavid, you have to bury those opportunities. And that's something that he's going to have to do in order to stay there. And I think that's the situation when you play with Connor McDavid. You're going to get your chances. You're going to get your opportunities. It's just by natural, just the way he is. But if you don't make the most of them, if you're not burying those chances, you're not going to be on that line very long. Now, I think right now Cahoon is kind of placeholder because they're looking for someone on that line. They're looking for someone that can come and play there. And to be honest, James Neal looked incredibly good the other night. He looks like he's found his legs. He really struggled this year. He had COVID at the beginning of the season. It took him a long time to kind of recover from that. It took him a long time to kind of get going. It took him some time to find his legs. He was on the taxi squad. I think he spent 12 or 13 games on the taxi squad. He was almost forgotten about. And then now he's come back. He's played 4 games in a row. And he looked like he has that jump again. He looks like he's kind of rejuvenated. He looks like he's found his legs. So if he can do that, there's a guy that can finish. He's proven that in the past. And if he can do that, there's a guy that could play on McDavid's left wing and be effective and finish. And like I said, you have to be able to keep up with McDavid, give him the puck, find open ice, and get out of his way when he's on a rush. And I think James Neal's a smart enough player to recognize that and to be able to do that. And if they can get a guy like that, if they get a good fit on that left side of McDavid's line, then they can keep that Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, and Yamamoto line together, which has done so much damage, but there's been such reluctancy to put them together because you don't have anyone else to play with Connor McDavid right now. And I think Puljujarvi has been done a good job on the right side. He's done a good job to stay there long enough, but you need someone to do a good job on the left side. And right now they're trying Cahoon, and Cahoon is doing his best. He's a pretty smart player, but he's just got to be a better finisher. If he was a better finisher, I think he would be more solidified on that top spot.
Well, it's funny, you bring up James Neal and we're talking about Dominic Cahoon. They're both, have been Pittsburgh Penguins. And Neal, of course, was that type of player, that finisher to go along with Crosby and Malkin. And Cahoon was in that slot as well. Obviously not to the same level of success that Neal saw. And, obviously teams change over time. But, he had been paired with Malkin as well, just because he's being looked for that kind of offense to complement the top line players. You identify Puljujarvi. I mean, obviously he's found a way to stay there, to stay on that line for a big chunk of the season, just because, like you said, someone who can look for the chances and finish. I know it hasn't been consistent for Puljujarvi, but I think that's what they're trying to find on the left-hand side with Cahoon. And who knows, maybe James Neal, if he's found his legs, will get that chance, like you said.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an open spot there, and I think that they're really trying to find someone there that can play there permanently. And right now it's Cahoon's spot to lose, and he's looked okay in that spot. But like I said, he's got to start putting up some numbers. Puljujarvi has done okay on the right wing there, and I think he's kind of there by default because there's really no one else to put up there with him. And it looks like sometimes his offense dries up, and then he'll score a couple of goals, and then his offense will dry up, then he'll score a couple of goals, and that kind of keeps him on that line for a little while. But I think he's starting to read off McDavid really well, and Puljujarvi can be an elite finisher. He's a big body. He's got a good shot, and he can finish his opportunities. I think the Oilers just wish that he did it a bit more often, and he's doing it right now.
I want to bring up Zach Kassian. Puljujarvi was basically put into that top line spot, partly because I would say Kassian was hurt at the beginning of the season. Puljujarvi got his chance there alongside McDavid. It's not to say Zach Kassian has been a mainstay on Connor McDavid's line recently or even over the last season or two. But we all know what he was like 4 years ago in the playoffs. In 2017, he was a force. He brought hands, he brought skating ability, plus he brought that nastiness that the Oilers, any playoff team needs at any given time. I guess playoffs or regular season. He has that factor when he's 100%. Now he hasn't been 100% this year. Injured at the beginning of the year, came back. It looked like he was finding his game, even though he's been playing on the third line. But now he's injured again. I don't know if Zach Kassian, even if he was 100%, would be seeing time with McDavid. But how much would the Oilers miss him if he's not back for the playoffs?
Well, I think they would miss that playoff intensity, and I think he does kind of ramp it up in the playoffs. We saw that a few years ago, and we didn't see it as much last season in the play-in series. He just didn't get his chance to kind of find his legs. Zach Kassian's had a tough year, and there's no doubt about it. He came in and he struggled at the beginning of the season. He just didn't have the energy. He didn't have the legs. He didn't seem to have that motivation and that meanness that Zach Kassian did. And then when he tried to find it, he got hurt in a fight. He broke his hand in a fight, and then he was out for a long, long time. And then he came back again. He's trying to find his way, and then he's trying to get into that mode where he's aggressive on the forecheck. He's finishing his hits. He's just a mean guy to play against. And then he gets hurt going in on a hit, and he hurts his knee for who knows for how long now. Who knows how much damage he did to it. The Oilers are kind of being quiet about it. He is on long-term IR right now. If they don't get him back for the playoffs, then they're missing that meanness and that toughness and that abrasiveness that you need in the postseason to be successful. There's regular season hockey and there's postseason hockey, and as we've seen, that the teams that have that in the postseason and can fight through that and have guys like Zach Kassian that can make an impact with a hit or a big play or something like that, or a fight, then you need those guys. But he hasn't been that Zach Kassian this year. He's been a guy that's really struggled to find his form. He's been a guy that's really struggled to find his footing. And now who knows, if you do get him back, how long it's going to take him to get back up to game speed.
And it's not to say the Oilers don't have physical players that play now. I mean, Jujhar Khaira has been injured recently as well, but he's that type of player. He can bring that nasty element in a big body, as well as Darnell Nurse. But it is a little different for Nurse now, since he is the minute munching, number one defenseman for the Oilers, playing upwards of 30 minutes a night. So you don't necessarily want him to be taking those kinds of chances, the kind of chances you could see a Khaira or a Kassian taking in a game, taking penalties and whatnot.
No, you don't. You don't want Nurse in your penalty box, and you need him on the ice. And you're right. He does play 30-plus minutes a night. He plays in all situations. He's your number one defenseman. He can bring that grit and that style of play, but you don't want him fighting. You don't want him getting into that. You don't want him in the penalty box. You have other guys that kind of can do that. And Khaira is another guy, but I think they have to be really careful with Jujhar Khaira, just with the concussion. Like, he got his first concussion in the fight. He was knocked out in that fight. He came back, and then it was a seemingly harmless hit that kind of buckled him again. And so the concussions aren't a thing where you get one and you recover from it. Concussions are a cumulative effect, and I think we saw that in past years with different guys. We saw Sidney Crosby miss so much time with his concussion back a few years ago. Right now, they're hoping to ease him back in the lineup, but you're right. He's got a guy that they're going to have to count on to play big, strong minutes in the postseason, and I think he's capable of doing that once he finds his game. But again, this is another guy that seems to find his footing, starts playing well, and gets hurt. Seems to find his footing, starts playing well, and gets hurt. So it's been a tough go for him. He just hasn't been able to put together a good run, and I think the Oilers do need him in the playoffs. If he's your fourth-line center, that's not a bad hockey team. If Jujhar Khaira is your fourth-line center and he can win faceoffs, kill penalties, and do that grunt work for you, he's become a pretty good NHL player. It's just a matter of doing it consistently for him.